Thanks, Ron. Good to see you. I know you're busy.
Pretty busy, yes.
You got I know you have a murder trial going on next.
Allegedly going to start the 20th or 21st if we have courtrooms.
And is this vehicular involved?
It is. It's the allegation is that my client took a ton of Xanax, which he did, drove on Pleasant Valley Road, and while high on the Valium, ran over a 60-year-old woman and her 9-year-old granddaughter who were riding a moped at about 9 p.m. on Pleasant Valley, which is about a one-lane road each way.
I remember seeing this case now.
And unfortunately, both of them died. My client had a serious Xanax addiction. The interesting fact in that case is that when they tried to measure the level of Xanax he had in his bloodstream, they were unable to do so because it was above the lethal limit. And when it gets above that limit, they don't have a test that can measure it, because nobody thought of making a test that would test
Like
above.
this would kill a horse, and yet this guy's alive.
Yeah, it's
insane.
And there are about 15 to 20 Snapchat videos over about a 2-month period where he's taking large handfuls of opiates, Xanax and other opiates, and driving, and then his car system records speeds upwards of 130 to 145 miles an hour over the month, all around town, streets I drive. He was driving crazy all over town.
Late at night or in the daytime too?
Daytime. There was one time at about 3 p.m. on Channel Islands when he was doing 135, and I'm thinking, I could have easily been driving on that road that day.
This is reckless behavior.
Extremely reckless behavior.
Why? Why is this happening? Why just like a guy likes to just get really high on Xanax and race his car? Is he a like Fast and Furious race car driver, or is he just a thrill seeker?
And see, here's where typically most people would read that and think this is a callous human being who gives no care for what he does or doesn't care about anything, and he should die.
Yeah.
That's what they would think. And I understand that thought process, but he was severely depressed for a long period of time, was literally trying to kill himself, where while he wouldn't say I was trying to commit suicide, he would say, I didn't care if I lived or died.
Yeah.
Okay. He had no comprehension of what he was doing. The fact that he was able to get behind the wheel of a motor vehicle and point it in the right direction and drive it is shocking to me at the levels that he was at. And that's because he had a high tolerance for it. So he had no appreciation for the risk that he was really taking. Didn't care. I mean, he may have had some appreciation that he could have died, but even that wasn't it's not fully fleshed out in terms of that. So the question is now, what should he be charged with? Should he be charged with murder or should he be charged with manslaughter? Our position is that it's a manslaughter case. We're not asking for him to be exonerated and walk away. The difference is literally between 22 years to 30 years to life. So
how do you approach a defense in a case like that? Because it seems like you're right. Like a lot of, when people cut me off in traffic, I think that is a murderous act, and that person should go to jail for that.
Yeah.
So it seems like a jury's going to be tough with something like that. But how do you approach it?
Well, number one, it is going to be tough, and you have to acknowledge that, and you have to acknowledge the emotions, and you have to acknowledge the fact that 2 innocent people were killed. And you have to deal with it as honestly as you can with a jury and tell them the truth about what happened, and hope that you can persuade people to look beyond the actual accident. If you just look at the accident, guy was on 30 Xanax, crashed into these 2 innocent people and they're dead. You're thinking, yeah, let's put him away. But if you look beyond that just a little, and you understand he's a 19-year-old kid at the time who did this, he was severely depressed. He had no care or consideration for anything in his life, let alone appreciation for the risk he was taking by driving on that much Xanax. You kind of understand that it's probably not murder. Technically not murder. It is vehicular manslaughter, but it ain't murder. And that's the rub. I mean, legally, we're on solid footing. Factually, we're on crappy footing.
Right.
It's a shitty case factually.
Right.
But legally, if it was a law school problem and you were in your criminal law class, you would say that I can't get to murder, because you have to have an intent to kill, as you know.
Malice, right?
Either expressed, which it's not, or implied. Okay. And the DA is going to argue it's implied malice because he knew or should have known that the actions he were taking could lead to death or great bodily injury. And the question would be, how would he know that? Okay, you
Right.
say, well, just the fact he took Xanax. Well, there's nothing on the bottle of Xanax that says if you drive with this, you're going to kill somebody.
Right.
Okay, that's one. So the next part, you'd think, okay, well, somebody reasonably would have known that. Well, if you've been doing that for months at a time, literally, if you've been for the last 5 months, you've been taking handfuls of Xanax and driving around crazy, and nobody had died. Why would you think on this occasion somebody would have?
Right.
Okay,
The like immediate foreseeability is not there.
it's just not there. I mean, his history tells us that he had every reason to believe he was not going to hurt somebody because he had been successful, whatever success is, by the way. And I say that knowing that what he was
Right.
doing is wrong. He had been successful driving this way for months.
How can you talk a little bit about that concept of malice? Because I'm still confused about it, honestly. In part because the word malice has like kind of a popular understanding of what malice and maliciousness is, but then there's like a specific legal definition of malice.
So the way I would think about malice legally in this context is malice is your intent. Okay, you have to have an intent to kill to have murder. So for first degree murder, you have to have express malice. David, I want you dead
Right.
and kill you. Or I put a gun at your head
Right.
and pull the trigger. If I put a gun at your head and pull the trigger, I'm expressing malice. I'm
think
not implying it. I have a pretty good
I
idea.
feel malice when you do that.
I have a pretty good idea that you're going to die.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
However, across the street from our addict here is a park, right? If I just go out the window behind you and shoot a gun across that park, am I expressing malice? They would say yes, but it's not expressed malice, it's implied malice, because I reasonably should know that if I shoot a gun across a park, that there's a good chance somebody could get killed,
Right.
right? And that's the implied malice. That's enough for second degree murder. I've implied by my actions that I'm taking an unreasonably dangerous act that could cause death or great bodily injury, and I should know that. And most reasonable people would find, somebody of my age and experience would know that if I shot a gun across a park from here, that somebody could die. That'd be enough to convict me of second degree murder. Just like you'll see in, we get a lot of second degree murders in gang shootouts where the gangs are shooting at each other. This happened in Kansas City just the other day.
Yeah.
And people die. Well, it's not really, it could be express malice because the intent I have to shoot you can be transferred to somebody else innocently who gets killed.
Right. It's like a reckless disregard for life.
That's different.
That's different.
That's
okay.
what it's supposed to imply.
That's in manslaughter, right?
But I'm trying to kill somebody. I'm assuming those gangbangers are trying to kill somebody.
Right.
Okay, so that's whether I kill you or kill the guy behind you doesn't really matter. I intended to kill. That's good enough.
Okay.
It also can be implied malice. I should know that shooting freaking guns in a crowded place is going to lead to somebody getting hurt or dead. Mm-hmm. That can be implied malice. I would guess it's going to be expressed. And I'm going to guess if the law in Missouri, Kansas City they were in was Missouri, not Kansas, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, the law in Missouri will be the same as California where, if you're gang members in a shootout, you can be life without parole.
Now you
They may have the death penalty there. I don't know.
Now, would you explain malice and all these issues differently, like if you're on the prosecution side versus on the defense side when you're
them the same.
explaining to a jury?
No, the law doesn't change because they're different sides.
Right, but the way you explain it can kind of like shade your take on it.
Now, I've tried 32 murder cases, soon to be 34, but 32 murder cases, and I've done, let's say 20 of them defense-wise.
Mm-hmm. Half and half, not bad.
Right. I have used the same explanations. No, it's probably more defense than prosecution.
Yes.
I've done the same explanations on malice and murder that I did as a prosecutor. I do it as a defense attorney because it's the law. Now, obviously, my take on it could be different.
Right. Yeah.
you don't
like
have
what's
it.
fair and what the
Right.
situation is.
Yeah. So, and of those 32, 30 have been successful cases for my clients or the state. And the two that I lost, I'll never forget. So,
well, we'll get into the losses. In terms of murder, this week we were talking. We had I think our first genuinely interesting like public policy discussion in the class this week because we learned about the concept of felony murder, and a lot of students didn't know about the concept of felony murder. So I just want to say like what it is very quickly, and I'd like to ask your understanding of it and your experience with this idea that like you can be charged with murder, first degree murder, and like spend the rest of your life in jail, in prison, even if you're not like the trigger man, even if you're not the person that actually commits the murder because you're involved in a dangerous felony.
well, and it goes back to the common law when we were trying to say to people that we would like you not to be engaged in dangerous felonious acts. And if you are, you're responsible for the reasonable consequences of those acts. So if you and I decide, this is how it classically used to go. It doesn't go this way anymore. But if you and I decide we're going to go rob the 7-Eleven tonight,
Right.
and I know you have a gun and you're the stick-up guy and I'm the driver, I have a good idea that if things go to shit, somebody could die.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just what you were just talking about. Like
Right.
you kind of like a reasonable expectation.
Right. And even though I'm not in the 7-Eleven, even though I wouldn't want you to shoot anybody, I've decided to engage in a serious felony with my friend David. And David has decided in committing that felony that somebody is going to get shot. The law says, okay, law used to say, okay, Bamieh, you're now responsible.
Right.
Okay. For his actions. That way we send a message that, hey, you shouldn't be doing stuff on, don't do the crime if you can't do the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it seems like. It seems like a pretty, I mean, the report that he showed us was in the context of all the, I don't know, action on back and forth on like prison reform and incarceration reform and that sort of thing. And like part of it was looking at felony murder as sort of a lot of attention has been on in the last few years because so many people have been sort of implicated in murders like that police have done even. Like they go rob someplace, the cops show up, shoot
Right.
one of their friends, and then those guys are all on the hook for like their friend's death.
Yeah.
When the cop killed them.
100%.
Which is pretty crazy. What do you think of that?
I actually think there's some kind of, it makes logical sense to me. Like,
The class was split. There were you could tell people were trying to wrap their minds around.
See, because I value all life pretty
Right.
much equally.
Right.
Okay, so even though a non-taxpayer dirtbag gets shot and killed, there's value to that life. We
Sure.
can't discount that life. And so if we're going to say if the clerk gets killed, it's felony murder, but not if one of the co-defendants get killed. It's not.
Right.
Has to be the same. So you got to value life equally.
Even the driver, Ron?
Even the driver.
So Judge Sabo was talking about a case that from like 35 years ago of a woman in Port Hueneme who was the driver, like in a case where the people she was with went up into an apartment and killed a cocaine dealer in the middle of a robbery. And she was on the hook for that. First-degree murder, even though she was in the car. And there were people like...
Well, see, there's some steps you're missing there. It's not just... Look, if I'm driving an Uber and I drive David to the 7-Eleven and he gets out and robs the place and says, hey, buddy, drive me home.
Oh, she was an accomplice to all of it.
I'm just saying that there's some... Yeah, you can't make... Well, you're painting it like she had no idea what was going on.
Oh, she did.
You're like a defense attorney, David. I'm trying to talk to you as a prosecutor. To get to the point where you're charging somebody, they have to have a little more involvement than just, hey, I'm in the car driving.
Right.
Now, I had a case, now it's been, since 2012, 2014, where they did a drive-by, and my guy was alleged to have handed the gun to the shooter who did the shooting in that case. And then that case turned on the fact that the one guy who said my guy handed the gun was the driver of the car who admitted to knowledge that they were going to go do the drive-by.
Right.
Said my guy didn't know, but he handed him the gun. And that guy got a deal for his testimony. He got voluntary manslaughter instead of a murder. And the DA relied on that dirtbag to try to convict my client. Unfortunately for the DA, though, that dirtbag talked to his girlfriend in the jail. And all jail phone calls are recorded. And
good to know.
Because
I feel like all phone calls are recorded.
Well, they may be, but you can't get all recordings. I
right.
can't get the jail phone calls. And my policy, anytime there's a snitch in the jail, I call those people snitches, as I get all their phone calls and listen to them. Because in my experience, idiots say a lot of dumb things on the phone.
Sure.
And on this recording was this guy saying that he was going to say my client was handed the gun because the DA wanted him to, and that's the only way she can convict him. And she told him if he said that, he would get a voluntary manslaughter. And that's why he was saying it.
Wow.
And his girlfriend said, so you're going to lie? The DA doesn't care. She'll give me the deal as long as I say it. And I heard that, I got that recording the night before he testified. And I show up in court the next day, and she wants a mistrial because of this tape. And I don't want a mistrial. But the co-defendant, there was the shooter's lawyer wanted a mistrial, which was a huge mistake by him, in my opinion, because it cost his guy potentially a conviction. And they got the mistrial on it. The guy in the court gave the mistrial. Then we came back, and no other witness had said my guy did anything. And I made a motion that the DA, a woman named Stacey Ratner, the only way anybody would say anything is if she told somebody to say something that before or previously had saw nothing. And the court said, I'd agree with you. And all of a sudden, this witness who at the last trial said he saw nothing, he didn't see anybody do anything, never saw the gun, all of a sudden he said, my client handed this guy the gun.
Wow.
And of course, I asked him, did you speak to Miss Ratner? He said, yeah. And I go, did she tell you to say this? And he said, yeah. So at the end of the people's case, I made a motion to dismiss, and the court dismissed it because he didn't believe the DA. He thought she put him up to it. He didn't think there was any reasonable evidence a jury can convict my guy, and he basically granted a motion to dismiss on my guy. The shooter, however, had to stay. And
I
face the
assume that
music.
kind of thing happens all the time with like the DA, like, you know, coaching people. Obviously, there's every attorney is going to coach their client to.
You can't. No, like when I was a prosecutor,
say the right thing.
When I was a prosecutor, I was I never gave directions to witnesses. My only direction was tell the truth about everything.
Yeah.
Because
do you ever rehearse with witnesses?
you don't rehearse. I do this now. I prep. Like I'm for my trial that I just finished a trial in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Every witness who testified, I prepped. It was a family law case. I don't tell them, hey, this is what you say. I said, hey, what do you think about this? Tell me what you would say about this. And I decide what questions to ask based on their responses and what I know they'll say.
Are there things that you really don't want them to say, though, that you're kind of like...
If I don't want them to say something, I don't call them as a witness.
Yeah, okay.
It's that simple. But I need to know what they're going to say. Like, I don't ask questions of anybody without having a reasonable belief of what they're going to say. I don't just roll the dice
Right.
and say, I hope it comes out my way.
Well, it seems like it's kind of surgical in what you're trying to get out of a witness, one way or the other.
It depends. Like, well, I'll give you an example from my last trial. There's something called a custody evaluation report. And when you do a civil trial, you have to declare your experts ahead of time.
This is in family law, right?
Family law.
Yeah.
It doesn't civil law, same rules. You have to declare what your expert is going to testify. So if I call David Parsons as an expert on podcasting, all you can testify to is your expertise in podcasting.
Right.
If I'm asking the questions. So I called a witness to testify about certain child development things. Doesn't really matter. I couldn't ask her about this custody evaluation because she was not an expert on that. I had another expert for that. But the other side's lawyer, for reasons that are unbeknownst to me, decided to ask this woman what she thought of the custody evaluation. Well, once she asked that question, this witness is allowed to do whatever she wants and answer that question as thoroughly as possible. And she had some very strong opinions about how shitty that evaluation was and why it should be read differently by the court. And it turned out to change the whole case because this woman assumed this expert would say something beneficial to her without knowing what she was going to say.
Oy.
And that's like trial 101. You don't roll dice like that in court. You just don't. So when I ask people questions, I usually know the answers ahead of time because I've talked to them. Now, I don't say, if you say something I don't like, I could say, you know what? I don't need to call Parsons.
Well, when you're cross-examining someone, isn't it different though? You haven't really gotten a chance to get.
It depends who they are. Most experts will talk to you. Number one, so I do have an idea what they're going to say.
Okay.
Number two, I have usually reports or their statements ahead of time, so I know what they've said in the past. So I know if I know what they've said, and if they say something different than what they've said, I can impeach them with their prior statements. So I do not roll dice, and I play a very calculated game in trial. I get the evidence that's going to help my client. I avoid the stuff that's not going to, and I play the odds. And I don't ask questions I don't know the answers to. I just don't.
Smart, yeah.
I just don't. And if somebody says something that's not in a report, I point out that the reports are void of that information and that therefore their credibility is at issue because now they're making shit up that they didn't say before. But that's how you do it. Now, when I talk to experts and they tell me stuff that is helpful to my case, I make sure, okay, I got to ask them about this, this, and that. When they tell me things that aren't helpful to my case, I have to decide is if they say this, because I have to assume the DA is going to ask them or the other side's going to ask them. I assume everybody's fairly smart. Sometimes they're not, but I assume everybody is to start with. I have to assume that they're going to be asked those questions and they're going to answer them the way they told me. So I have to decide then, is it worth it to call this witness or not? Oftentimes you say, yeah. If they ask that question, I'll just have to take the hit, but it's worth it because I need whatever I need from that witness.
So who do you bring in on your Xanax case to present information to the jury as a witness?
Actually, and this is going to come out after the trial's over, hopefully, so I'll tell you. I plan on making a lot of my case through their witnesses, through the CHP officers who did the background investigation on my guy, through the toxicologist who did the measurements of the amount of Xanax he took.
So you plan on impeaching their witnesses?
Not
or
impeaching.
Trying to?
No, just making my case. I don't have to impeach. I think everybody's telling the truth. I don't think anybody's lying.
Okay.
Don't have to impeach anybody.
All right.
And I'm going to assume.
We didn't get to that vocab word yet. I was just throwing it in there.
Right. I assume everybody's going to tell the truth. I assume, and I really do believe this. They're going to all tell the truth. And
so it's more just getting them your take on the information.
I believe that they will testify that for months, Jacob's my client, has been taking large amounts of Xanax and driving around town. I believe for months they're going to say he's been driving recklessly. And for months he's had no accidents, no contact with law enforcement. Yes, I believe they're going to say all that.
Right.
I have a mental health expert who's a doctor who did a bunch of psychological testing on Jacob, who's going to say that he couldn't comprehend the nature of his actions because here's why. These various factors make it so that, one being he's 19 and your brain ain't fully developed at 19. And if you raise a teenager like I have now, you realize, especially with boys, they're real stupid as teenagers. And they don't appreciate risk and consequence like they will when they get older. So we'll have testimony like that. And then I'm going to use the law. So I have a very narrow focus with everybody.
Yeah.
The DA is two things that she's going to do. She's going to say that when you sign up for your license, I don't know if you know this, but when you sign up for your license at 16, you sign this form that's two-sided. Everybody has in California. Okay. On the back side of the form that you sign is in about 8-point type is the line, driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs can be dangerous to human life and could lead to somebody's death.
Right.
And she's going to try to impute the knowledge of that form to my client, saying he signed the form, therefore he must have known this.
Isn't this something called like the Watkins statement or something like that?
No, Watson.
Watson.
But Watson is dealing with DUI convictions.
Okay.
Not your DMV form that nobody's read at 16 years old.
The Watson thing is like if you've been convicted of DUI, the judge will tell you, admonish you that you could be convicted of murder if you do this again and hurt somebody.
Right. The way I would cross-examine that is like, let's say that, I don't even know what paragraph it is. Let's say it's paragraph 8. There's all kinds of fine print in all the paragraphs about shit you should do and not do. So I always ask the person, what's in paragraph 6? What's in paragraph 4? Just tell me. Like, you don't know? You're responsible.
You have a duty to read,
Right. Well, you can have all the duty you want. Anybody with common sense, nobody reads that shit. At 16?
Yeah.
What are you doing? You're signing? Give me the license. Let's take the picture.
Right. I mean, no one reads this fine print on anything, really.
I mean, anybody have to take a loan out recently?
Yeah. Or, cell phone and apps. I mean, when you download an app that just sends you this like document that's like 40 pages. No one. I imagine no one reads it.
That's a dumb argument. So her better argument, in my opinion, is saying this amount of Xanax, if you took it, you cannot reasonably not know that it's dangerous to drive this way.
Yeah,
like, that's the best argument.
Okay,
but that's why we have a trial. And now, if we can get a jury not to be emotional, I think I have a chance. But if I can't, then they're going to convict him. Yeah, that's going to happen.
On the felony murder thing, one of the things that came up in our class talking about it is. It doesn't exist in California the same way, right? No. Like you have to actually directly kill the person to get first degree murder in California.
You have to have an intent to kill.
Okay, and that could actually be encouraging someone else to kill someone.
Yeah, shoot the MFer.
Right.
It's a little different than I'm driving the car.
So where do you fall on the public policy debate about this? Because the DA up in San Francisco. Not DA anymore, Chesa Boudin. It was a big case in terms of looking at public attitudes about crime that I think brought out a lot of the contradictions in attitudes. Because on one hand, he's elected in San Francisco as the DA in 2019 to in part because he's speaking a lot about Black Lives Matter and he's gonna soften the approach to crime, and that's popular at that moment for whatever reason. He gets in there, starts doing that, and there's a huge backlash. And they end up recalling him in a recall election and putting someone else in there who's a little tougher on crime. What do you think of all that? Because it seems like that tension is in Ventura County even over DAs and how tough they are. It seems like a part of what we think of as crime.
I'll answer that in a roundabout way, but I will answer that question. But the former DA of our county was a guy named Michael Bradbury, sorry.
Yes.
My boss, the guy who hired me.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay.
In the 90s, right?
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so Bradbury lived, and I was shocked when I found this out. I was working in the DA's office. It may have been a week, maybe not even a week, where I got invited to come to his house and have a barbecue with him.
Right.
Go to some barbecue. Not just me, but there were other people, but I got invited to a barbecue. So I said, hey, where do you live? And he goes, Hang'em High Ranch. Okay. I thought he was joking.
Yeah, where's that?
I thought, there's no fucking way he lives at Hang'em High Ranch. Right? There's no way. You can't be a DA who's prosecuting people in the name of the place you live is Hang'em High. Well, drive up for that barbecue and a big lot, Hang'em High Ranch.
Wow.
That's where he lived. And that's what he was famous for, that he was a no-nonsense prosecutor who put criminals away for long periods of time and did not make deals. Now, there was the myth and there was a legend and there was the truth. Most people went with the legend. But the truth was that we always made deals. The DA's office, every DA makes deals. You have to. That's the way business is done. We just did it a little differently than most. That Hang 'em High Ranch, to a large extent, still permeates in the DA's office.
I assume so.
It's not the same as it was. It's not the same as it was. But it's still there. Even the current DA, Nazarenko, when he ran for DA, he ran on he'd be tough on crime approach. And Eric, his thought philosophy is he's very tough on DUIs, guns, and any kind of vehicular kind of deaths caused by drunk drivers or whatever. But he may take a different approach as to drugs, use of drugs, drug sales, things of that nature. A little softer on that than Bradbury was. The law has changed dramatically too.
Yes,
give
it
Eric
has,
credit.
right.
So, but that's the way it is. So the question in San Francisco, though, and all these other places, Philadelphia and all these other cities that have elected these, L.A. also, we'll call them what they are, George Soros prosecutors. George Soros is largely responsible for these prosecutors. He's funded their campaigns and run their elections, and his campaign team has directed these elections because Soros realizes that he can have a lot of influence on the local level.
Well, I just want to add something to this. Chesa Boudin, I don't know, for people that are paying attention to the longer history of this. I mean, you said George Soros. You also mean just like the left. It's like this is the left wing. But
Soros is responsible. He was the biggest campaign contribution to Boudin.
It doesn't surprise me.
He was also the biggest campaign contributor to the guy in L.A.
But Boudin's, I don't know if you know this, but Boudin's parents were like huge, like radical leftists in the Weather Underground in the 60s. They went to jail for being involved in all these robberies.
Well, I don't.
And he's raised by Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn. So like, there's a whole.
You don't get to Soros by being on the Young Republican Club,
right? So like, it's just weird to me those two worlds colliding at all. Honestly.
Right. Well, the thing about that though, as somebody who is from the Bay Area originally and who spends time in the city and whose daughter works there, is I go there quite a bit, and I could tell you the San Francisco today is much different than the San Francisco of 2018, 2017. It's just different.
Yeah.
The amount of drug use that's openly allowed on the streets, the amount of crime that they have.
It's bad there.
And the amount of small businesses who've been directly affected because of the increasing crime rates. Now, they could say it's all COVID, but the reality is it's just not as safe. It's just not. And to think that city, which is a majestic, beautiful city, allows for that to happen is sad to me.
Do you think that there's a relationship between those two things, though?
Yeah.
Like we have softer on crime, therefore there's more
Giuliani,
theft and all that
look
sort
what
of thing.
Giuliani did in New York when he became
what
he did when he became mayor. He believed in the broken window theory.
Yes.
And he said, let's prosecute all the small crimes. Let's get these guys on probation. Let's clean up the city. And the city changed. It became safer, became more profitable. Yes, there's a direct correlation. Anybody who says there's different, there's not, is just lying to themselves.
So that attitude, that hang 'em high attitude is really, I mean, it seems pervasive in DA's offices.
Would you
right?
rather live in a community that had hang 'em high, or would you rather live in a community that says let 'em go?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
And I think that question, I think most Americans fall pretty solidly on the side. That's what I'm saying. It's like these guys were elected in the midst of all of the George Floyd protests and the sort of revulsion with the system. These guys were elected, and yet they didn't stay. They didn't stay in part because they got monstrously unpopular.
Why?
Well, because
crime increased, people got more victims, people got businesses closed, and it was unsafe. And here's the thing.
So that means most Americans have a hang 'em high attitude.
I would say that a lot of people like to believe in the tooth fairy. A lot of people want to believe that we're all can be good and we can forgive and things are going to go the way they are. Reality is that is much different. And so sometimes we can vote based on ideals and realize there's a practicality to what we should be doing. And eventually people vote practicality once they realize that the ideals do not implement well.
Yeah.
It's just like, the other day I was listening to a debate for Senate with this woman in California who was advocating a $50 minimum wage. Sounds great.
Yeah.
But it would close so many businesses and you'd be paying, what, $200 for a hamburger? You can't.
It's almost that now, I think.
But like there's this ideal or this thought and this utopia that you wish to have.
Yeah.
And then there's a reality that a small business can't function that way. Just can't. It's just impossible. And you could sell it to me any way you want, but as a small business owner, I know damn well that won't work. As does everybody else. We could say we want to be lighter on crime. We're going to let everybody out. We're not going to put people in prison as much as everybody else. Okay. There's a reality to that.
Yeah.
You get more crime. You get
Not
more
necessarily. I don't think
Yeah.
that correlation is totally there.
100%.
Like, for instance, like the felony murder thing they say is a deterrent to crime.
No, I'm not saying that. No,
But-
I'm not. You can
Like,
call.
how do you stop crime, really?
You don't stop crime. What you do is you prevent it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. There's always going to be assholes who are going to
The
do shit.
$50 minimum wage.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck.
I'm wondering what your attitude is towards that, in part because you've been on both sides of it, and now you have to as a defense attorney, you kind of have to.
Once again, David, I've only been on one side. That's the side of Ron Bamieh.
I get that, but when you're in front of a jury, you're on the side of a client.
No.
Right?
No. I'm on the side of truth and justice.
Come on.
Come on. That's
Come
my
on.
ideals. Yeah.
No, I'm just wondering, if your attitude is that tough sentences can deter crime,
I'm not-
then
you know
how
what-
how do you advocate
I'm not
for the
saying
other side of it?
no.
when you're a defender?
You're not listening to me then. Okay. I'm not saying if I sentence you to 10 years, that prevents Bob from committing a crime.
Right.
I'm saying if I sentence you to 10 years, you will not commit a crime for 10 years. At least not on a taxpayer. You'll do it on some inmates maybe, but not on a taxpayer. So I'm saying I lock up enough people who commit crimes because we know that most crimes are committed by recidivists. We do know that. Okay.
Sure.
So if I put them away, my risk lowers. Okay. Now, somebody who is
We're gonna
criminally,
end up with 1 billion people in prison, though.
you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet. But we may end up with more people in prison, but I'll be able to walk the street safely. I'll be able to have my business opened. I'll have police that will enforce the law. In San Francisco, you had two things. One, people weren't being prosecuted. The police got frustrated, stopped enforcing laws.
Well, there were also a couple of, which is the interesting angle on it. I thought was kind of the contradiction in terms of even on the left, the racial angle on it in San Francisco was that there were a number of high-profile anti-Asian hate crimes that happened in the city, including a guy that pushed an old lady down. These kinds of cases, push an old lady down the street. Few Asian people that were clearly targeted for that kind of violence. And Chesa Boudin made the comment that, people have temper tantrums and, we're not going to prosecute this guy too hard. And it was the Asian American community that was like, fuck this guy. We want to prosecute these people. And so, to me, the contradiction there in terms of, wanting some sort of, racial justice for people who are being attacked on the street. At the same time, the DA is, being soft about that. There's a lot there. It's
not that difficult.
It's not clean.
No, well, the thing is, you can try to make it as
It pissed people off, is what I'm saying.
as complicated it is. But here's the thing: as DA, you're a public safety job.
Yeah.
You're law enforcement. Your job is to you make the city safer than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's not to protect people who commit crimes. It's to keep your citizens safe. And when you start turning the focus on, I want to protect the criminals, or I want to take it easier on the criminals, or I think people are being unfairly prosecuted. The only way you're unfairly prosecuted is if you're charged with a crime you did not commit and convicted. You're unfairly prosecuted.
Right.
If, no matter what your color is, if you're charged with a crime you did commit, you're being fairly prosecuted. That's it.
But there's
So
grades of what you're charged with, right? You could be charged with a more severe thing than you could be
then you set a
chosen
policy.
charged with murder.
You have to set a policy in terms of what your is. Now, look, the way I would do it, frankly, is this. I'd say anybody who commits any kind of act of violence that causes any kind of serious injury, I'm going to go for the max on everybody. You do anything to hurt anybody severely, I'm going for the max. On misdemeanors, I'm going to get you on probation. I don't care about the time you do. I care about being on probation. Because when you're on probation, then I could search you whenever I want. I could pull you over whenever I want. I can make your life a living hell if you screw around.
This is USDA.
Do
This
me
is
a
your
DA.
DA
Simple
platform.
policy.
Yeah.
Simple policy. Just I'm going to prosecute anybody who commits any violent acts. Also, any acts against children or any kind of sex offenses, you're done. I'm going to put you away as long as I can for as long a period as I can. And you just prosecute the crimes that way. If I can prove it, I prosecute it. If I can, I won't. But I don't care if you're black, white, or pink. If you take a bat to somebody's head, I'm going to get as much time as I can on you. Whatever the law says is the most, that's what I want. I don't care what your color is. Okay? And so I'm not even looking at, when I was a prosecutor and I was looking at the case, I never looked at the race of the offender. Not once. I can't even think of a time I ever looked at the race of offender as a prosecutor. I just looked at the crime. What can we prove? Okay? Do we have prints? Do we have witnesses? Do we have video? Do we have phone records? What can we prove? Once I knew that, I filed it. I knew the race of the guy when he showed up in court and I saw him.
Right.
Until then, I had no idea. Nor did I give a shit. And I'm going to bet 99% of prosecutors think the same way I do.
Yeah. I mean, I probably think that makes sense. I mean,
It's a box on a form that you don't even read.
Yeah.
A lot of times, I didn't even know the name of the guy.
I mean, it's sort of like I guess the attitude about carcerality, the attitude of what prison is and sentencing and that sort of thing is. It seems like it's harder on the DA side than on the defense side, if that makes sense. Like, are there more people that are softer on crime that are criminal defense attorneys? People like the reform types,
because like
the people who are
there are cases that are worth certain things. Okay,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of, and I've been in this boat many times where people are asking. I had a case where this woman committed fraud on the elderly, and she tried to steal millions of dollars, but she was unsuccessful.
Okay,
unsuccessful. She didn't get a dime. She ended up paying money, not losing money, right? And the DA wanted like a lot of prison time. And I'm like, that's unreasonable. I go, if she actually took the money and kept the money and we couldn't reimburse it, then freaking hammer her. But she didn't get anything. And he goes, well, her intent was. I go, we can say whatever somebody's intent is. Okay, let's go with what she did. She didn't get any money. And so that's unreasonable. You can have unreasonable deals on anything. Like, things are worth certain things. First-time offender doing something is different than a two-time offender doing something. Violence is violence. Doesn't matter first or second. We can all understand that. But when you start treating people differently, and we all know, like all the defense bar knows, what things are worth here. Somebody comes into my office, tells me what they did, and I know their record, I can give them a really good idea of what it's worth. When a DA contradicts that, for whatever reason, then we think they're being ridiculous. And that's where the issues happen. That's where people get upset. Because we know what everything's worth. Everybody knows what it's worth. We know what we've done in the past. We know what we do when you pay restitution, when you don't pay restitution. We know what we do when you have certain crimes with priors and when you don't have certain crimes with priors. We know. These aren't mysteries to anybody. And so when you have a prosecutor, like sometimes we'll get a new prosecutor in the DA's office, and they'll want to get a reputation for being really tough. And they'll make ridiculous offers. And the whole defense bar will shit on them. Like, we're not dealing with Bob over there because he's being a dick and an asshole. So we're going to be assholes to him. It's not because we're soft on crime. It's because he has upped the value of everything that's different than the rest of us.
Right.
And everybody can say, well, I want the maximum penalty possible. That's not the way the sausage is made. Okay, we have to move the train. You can't have every case in trial. If you do, you know what happens? A lot of people go out for free because we can't accommodate all those trials. People have statutory rights to go to trial. You can't get them to trial. Those cases get dismissed. That's not what you want. So there's a way to do this that's logical, that makes sense, that penalizes the people that should be penalized, and the ones that should not be penalized as harshly. Like, we can give people second chances. When an 18-year-old kid robs a liquor store and nobody gets hurt, that's a serious crime, no doubt about it. It's scary, the whole deal. That's different than a 3-time felon who's just out of prison doing the same thing.
Yeah.
When you rob somebody on the street because your family's not eating, that's different than somebody who's going around robbing people because they want to enhance the reputation of their gang, or what they call putting in work for the gang. Totally different. They should be treated differently.
Yeah, I mean, Judge David was telling us about all the sort of robberies, house robberies happening in the Thousand Oaks area recently, and talking about these crews that are like, these aren't like poor people going to steal stuff because they need to eat.
No.
These are like pro crews showing up in like luxury SUVs, and they know how to get around Ring cameras and all that shit. It's insane.
Yeah.
Insane. Yeah, that does feel different.
It is.
And I think that...
And that's different than some guy running into a house and grabbing shit because he's hungry and wants to get lunch.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, and that's just... To me, that's a simplistic way of looking at what crime is and what causes it. I mean...
But everybody understands that here.
Yeah.
And we all deal with it the same way. There's sophistication is punished. Okay? Repetitiveness is punished. But we should acknowledge certain people who do things because of circumstance or bad luck or stupidity, and they can be changed. We want to give those people hope.
Is there room for that at the DA's office at all, though? Sort of like, we recognize that this is a different situation than this situation.
Many times that's happened, yes.
There's a quality to it.
Many times that's happened. And
I think that, I mean, the reason I brought up, I mean, it was funny to hear everyone's opinion on the felony murder thing because there were different levels. I mean, no one was really outraged. There aren't a lot of hippies in the class. But like Chesa Boudin, he's back in teaching at Berkeley, where I'm sure you think he belongs.
Look, I got nothing against him as a person. But he was a terrible prosecutor.
Yeah, well, there were. I mean, the people that came in fired everybody. They fired 15 attorneys.
I would have.
Which I didn't know a DA like brings his own crew of attorneys with him. sometimes.
Well, you don't have to bring your own crew, but you can get rid of people. And
Right.
then hire people that you want to.
Right.
There's been a big change over in the Ventura County DA's office since the new guy took over.
Oh, really?
Look at the. So in the calendar courtroom, on the right side of the courtroom, against the wall are the prosecutors. On the left side are the defense attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
This is the way it's been since time immemorial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so the other day I'm standing there with the guy who I'd known for quite some time, and we're looking at the wall. That's what we call it, the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And over there are a bunch of these young, fresh faces who I've not seen before. And I said, I know two people over there. And somebody asked me, well, then how do you negotiate with them? I go, well, the good thing is they all know me.
Yeah.
I don't have to know them yet, but I'll know their boss. I'll
Mm-hmm.
know somebody over there. But like when I saw those people, I go, boy. And I also noticed that it was more diverse crowd than most of the time, than I've noticed before. And I thought, well, he's making changes. That's good. And the only way you do that is people have to leave, and you have to replace them.
And what are those changes?
Well, I think it's a conscious effort to be more diverse in the people that you hire,
Right.
and to have different experiences.
But if they never care about race, then why do we need diversity, Ron?
I'm not saying we do. I'm just saying that he's doing that.
Yeah.
I didn't say that we have to do it. I'm just
Yeah.
saying he's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different moment. It feels like, and the Chesapeake thing is an extreme example, I think, and it happened, I think, around Chicago too. They kind of like prosecutors.
Philadelphia.
Prosecutors
Angeles.
that came in and said we're going to do things soft. And I mean, the fact that they were elected means that there are a significant portion of the population that was like looking for some. It's interesting. This is what I wanted to bring up with you because I think you're a figure like this as well. You're looking for some humanity in the system. You're looking for some way to like express how complicated these things are. At the same time, there is a desire to like have a baseline level of punishment
here's the thing,
in line for people that do bad shit.
Right, but see, like, I have a problem when people say these idealistic goals that don't conform to the way things are done or reality or human behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a problem with that. Like, people, there's certain things you just have to do as a prosecutor to be successful, and you'll never convince me otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
if you're
what?
willing, if you're willing to sacrifice those things, if you're willing to let people go, not hold people responsible on bail and keep them in custody, and then you have to live with the consequences that you're going to have more issues, more crimes, more recidivism. That's what's going to happen. Look, the people who commit lots of crimes, you know, if you told me somebody was arrested and charged with like 5 burglaries, I would say, yeah, they probably have done 50. Okay, they probably have prior convictions.
Right.
That's the way it works, because we know recidivists do most of our serious crimes. Property crimes are recidivists mostly. I'm not saying you can't have a first timer. If they're a first timer, it's the first time they've been caught.
Right.
But it's really rare. Okay, so that's just the way it is. And if I don't have to do a study to figure that out.
What I'm saying is I think most people agree with you. Like, and that's why I think that it's tough to be a criminal defense attorney when you're talking to juries who are sometimes thinking that, yeah, fuck everyone that does any crime. You know, like there's a tough on crime attitude pervasive in America.
Now, the other thing is that the DA has to call the crime what it is. You want to call. So I punch you. If I stand up and punch you now, that can be called a battery. It can be called assault and a felony. Okay, basically assault with the desire to cause you great bodily injury. It can be a felony. It could be called the same thing.
Could be attempted murder.
Be hard
on
on
how hard you punch me.
You're
You're a lot bigger than me. I'm going to argue it's attempted murder.
That'd be a stretch. But let's say we could theoretically do that.
Yeah.
Let's say I punch you twice, put you on the ground, and hit you a couple more times. We can call it attempted murder. So then the prosecutor's judgment comes in, and what are we going to call that? Okay, and a lot has to do. We can call it the minor thing, a battery, which is nothing. Probation, 2 years, maybe sometimes not even that, and pay a fine and fee, and then we're done. Okay, assault with intent to cause great bodily injury, that's a felony. That's serious. I can eventually I don't have to go to prison on that, but I could do some time, maybe 180 days in jail. All right, on that, and I'll be on probation. I'll have a felony. I mean, when I complete probation successfully, I can maybe get that expunged, but it's still a felony. It's going to affect my life, my job. I couldn't be a lawyer anymore for sure with a felony like that. Attempt murder. Now I'm going to prison for 9 years. Okay, my
is it
life.
a calculation from the DA that of like what can we actually prove here? They
Well,
often want to
I
they
think-
actually want to win.
Right. Well, it's not just that. Like when I was doing it, I'll just speak for myself.
Yeah.
I would think, what's the case really worth? Okay, so first thing I want to know is how bad was the victim hurt? I don't want to talk to the victim. How bad was he hurt? Now, if you say, hey, I got a black eye, but I went to work the next day. Okay. All right. If you say, I've been in a coma for 2 months and my life's forever changed, that's a little different, right? So, but it's worth something. I have to figure out the value. And by figuring out the value, I figure out the charge. And there's an ethical way to do that. There's a logical way to do that. When somebody takes a guy who gets a one-puncher and charges him with a serious felony, that bothers me. Okay, that's not hang him high. That's hanging him like an idiot.
Right.
Okay. Now I have to go to court on that. I have to fight that.
I'm just wondering what's the difference.
Big difference.
Because I mean, so I guess sometimes we think of the law as like a blunt hammer in that way. But
It is. But there's an ethical way to do it.
Right.
It's just like, okay, if a 19-year-old sleeps with a 16-year-old, it's statutory rape. Or a 17-year-old. Let's make her a 17-year-old.
Sure.
It's statutory rape. You could charge a sex and you can make that guy register if you charge it a certain way. Should you? I would say no.
Do I have to answer while we're recording?
I would say,
yeah.
Assuming it's all consensual.
This actually comes up in class a lot, actually.
Assuming it's all consensual, I would say that'd be a tragedy.
Yeah.
Okay, tragedy. Why would we want to do that to a 19-year-old? Okay. Now, if it's a 35-year-old and a 16-year-old, now I'd probably think a little differently, right? If they got them drunk and did it, I think a little differently.
Right.
If they forced themselves, I think a little differently.
Yeah.
Right? So there's value to everything, and we have to do it in consciousness with who we are, like human experience.
Yeah.
What's normal, what's not. A 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, that's a college night. You're going to charge college kids, a freshman and a sophomore or junior. You charge a junior with a crime?
You've had cases like this, haven't you?
Oh, yeah. And
more so lately than before, right?
they come and go like in waves.
Yeah.
Depends on usually what's going on at UCSB.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like that world, I wonder how pervasive it is that people actually get prosecuted for something like that.
Well, I mean, I've had cops when I was a DA come to me with those cases when I was doing sex crimes. I'm like, this kid's 19 and she's 17 and we're doing what? And you want what?
Yeah.
Was it non-consensual? No, it's consent. Was she drunk? No.
They're just boyfriend, girlfriend or something.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not doing that.
Yeah. That's insane.
We're not doing that. Yeah, I don't care. We're not doing it. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And led to some arguments, but it's just being, it's having some realization the way humans work and the way life works, and that we're going to put the scarlet letter on somebody for the rest of their life because his girlfriend was 17 and he didn't wait a month. Really? We're doing that?
Well, we put scarlet letters on everybody, honestly, one way or the other. I mean, I think that's like the public policy discussion was what I wanted to bring up with you because it came up with felony murder, and it was the first time, really, that any of us had talked with each other about what we all think about that. And everyone has different ideas about who deserves what and how harsh the sentence should be, depending on, I mean, there's so many factors.
Okay, well, you're in a law school class with a bunch of people who have no practical experience in the system.
No, we're all just learning it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then once I could tell you,
I mean, we're like jury members right now, honestly.
Oh no, jury members don't punish though; they just decide the facts. Jury members don't have anything to do with punishment or the charging. They have a lot to do with what's determined to be the facts and
they got to be thinking about it though, right? Like whenever I've been on a jury or been thinking about jury service, I'm always like, oh, I could be involved in sending someone to prison. Like that is a. Whatever you think about that is kind of a heavy responsibility.
That's the reality of it.
Yeah,
that's the reality of it. Yeah, I would expect most. I've never been on a criminal jury.
Yeah,
I've talked to a bunch of them. I have never been on one. But jurors are instructed not to think about the consequence. They are. They're told don't even think about it.
That's insane. You've got people's lives in your hands and you know it.
Well, they may know it, but they're not allowed to talk about it, and they're supposed to only consider the facts of the case as applies to the law.
All right, Ron, we will return to San Francisco at some point and check how things are doing on the streets there.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks so much.
I'll be there in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, so I'll let you know.
That's right. Yeah, please.
Okay.
Give us the crime report.
Well, I was there. I was there for my daughter swearing in.
And you were like, this goddamn DA has ruined this city.
No, I wasn't. I was like, wow, it's sad.
Yeah.
I don't feel safe.
Well, the cities, since pandemic, since the Republican governors started busing migrants into these cities, the cities have become, as always, but I think more than has been in a long time, the center of just really ugly political discussions with all of this stuff. Because I haven't been in New York in a long time, but everyone that lives there that I know reports the same thing.
It's rough.
The vibes are getting 1970s over there.
That's tough. All right, so the next time we do this podcast, we'll talk about the results of this trial that we just talked about today.
Sounds good.
All right. Okay.
Stay tuned, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.